if you look at this complete avionics block diagram, it consists of many sub systems, and they're all linked with the data bus. And as you have seen in the previous semester, data bus is nothing but a bunch of wires which is used for transmitting data from one block to another block. Okay, and little bit. So we'll just go a little bit into the details of MIL standards, and then that should end the module 2. Module 3 will be mostly on this autopilot and FMS. Okay, so that's how the course coverage is going to be. If you really look at the sort of jobs we get in avionics today in India, it's all about system integration. Okay. So what it means is a number of subsystems will be produced by different manufacturers. As an integrator, what you are supposed to do is for a specific aircraft design, you have to put all these dabbas together and make them work in a particular fashion. So that is what in a nutshell is system integration. If you really look at the LCA Mark 1A project, HAL has now been reduced to the role of a system integrator. So what it means is different people like L&T, or a number of private sector companies, they're all making even the structural components, and HAL is just integrating it into an aircraft. Though the overall design is with the HAL team, but individual blocks have been delegated to other manufacturers. Okay, when we talk about system integration, now what's going to happen is if you're dependent on all these individual manufacturers, they will have their own way of making things. So when you want to put things together, you will find it very difficult. So what people decided was, let's have standards for all avionics equipment at the box level, and inside the box it's left to the individual manufacturers how they want to implement it. So the first standard which came out is on system integration is this ARINC, Aeronautical Radio Incorporated. It's an American standard, and even now everyone follows this ARINC standards. So they started defining systems in terms of functional requirements. Like if you say ILS receiver, so they will say that okay, it should work from this so and so frequency to so and so frequency. Then they went one step further. If it has to be fitted in a particular type of aircraft, then it should meet so much of performance and accuracy criteria. Performance in the sense, like say for 40 kilometers, the localizer beam should be picked up by the receiver. Accuracy is, it should be plus minus 0.5 degrees deviation. That sort of numbers they started giving to systems. And one of the most important things is input and output interfaces. Because now we are going to talk about different dabbas being made by different people, which means all the inputs which is coming out of your system should be compatible with the dabba. And similarly, the output of the dabba should also be compatible with your system. So that will not happen unless you clearly define what is the input and output interfaces. Because one fellow will say, I'll have an analog interface for my box. The other manufacturer will say, no, I'll have a digital interface to the box. So that doesn't work. Okay, so you can never put things like that. So they started defining the input and output interfaces. Environmental specifications. So depending on the requirements, whether it's MIL or civilian aircraft, you define the temperatures, vibration requirements, and all the stuff. The later versions of ARINC even went to the extent of telling what should be the physical dimension. So what happens is, if you say an ILS receiver today, that ILS receiver external dimensions should not exceed a particular value. Okay. Or neither can it be below. So that it's something like fitting these boxes into a rack. Okay. So exactly those physical dimensions should be compatible. So suppose today I am having a Cessna aircraft which has a Collins ILS receiver. Tomorrow, say Collins winds up and I want to fit it with a Bendix King receiver. It should not happen that I start redefining, re-engineering the cockpit of Cessna. All I have to do is just plug out the old ILS receiver and replace it with a newer version. So it's called form, fit, and function. Okay, uh, that's what is the trend nowadays. Form, fit, and function. So just replacement of the bus. Okay, now that's what is happening. Um, so it's not only the mechanical requirements, the electrical interface also is well defined. So if some fellow, all aircrafts will generate some plus some voltage, your box should be able to work with that particular voltage. Similarly, the outputs signals which are coming out of the box should be compatible with the existing standards. So this ARINC played a very important role in system integration. So this module is just a little bit of theory only, nothing much technical to understand, but nevertheless, employment point of view, if you land up in any avionics job, most of the time you'll be dealing with this particular aspect. So initially, when you talk about 50s and 60s, um, the number of separate analog systems. So essentially, they were all analog systems. Okay, in 60s. So you had a radar, some displays, navigation systems. So if you have a radar, the radar will have its own display. Then you have some ILS system that will have its own display. So you had number of displays, all independent displays connected to a particular to their corresponding systems. Okay, with of course the wiring was there. So this is what it says. Okay, so a lot of displays. But the number of systems kept on increasing with time. In the 60s and 70s, you started getting new technologies uh, like TECAN, even earlier versions of TCAS. Uh, all these things started increasing. Okay, so the number of boxes which went into the cockpit also started increasing. And this was a time when this actual digital technology also started coming in. Basically, after Apollo mission, okay, that's when they started using it for aerospace application. So it was a fallout of Apollo mission, all the digital technology. Now, this digital technology had some processing power, inbuilt processing power, which means so if this is a box, it can share information to some system too, or it can take inputs from different systems and process it. So this was a slight improvement over the previous one. So what happened was they started interlinking all these boxes. So you look at the radar, it goes to the display. It takes input from altimeter. It gives information to mission computer. So this resulted in what is called as a very unreliable system called as bird's nest. It was like a nest with a lot of wires interconnected between boxes. So this was a terrific time for in aviation because no one knew when things are going to go wrong. Then they said, why should we have all this dedicated wiring? Why not have a common wiring where all these boxes can be connected? So now they told, okay, let's have one single wire, one single display, and then to the display we'll have all these boxes. sorry, to this single common wire, we'll connect all the boxes. So yes, and so you'll have a lot of things coming into the single wire, and this subsequently came to be known as the uh, aviation standard buses. So the common bus model was no dedicated displays. You have all this information coming into the bus, and it goes into the display. The radar warning receiver, weapons, you name anything. It was all dumping data. Now the problem was, if you look at this, essentially it was a mission computer which was trying to do this interface. And if this, God forbid, this fails due to some reason, the entire thing collapses. So this was again leading to some other problem. So then they said, okay, let's not depend on just one system. We'll have enough redundancy built into it. But the moment you say redundancy, it is more cost and weight. But mid 2000 onwards, the size of the digital systems drastically reduced, and then redundancy was something which was now feasible. So what you call as quadruple redundancy, that is for every subsystem is replicated with 4 such systems. So even if one fails, the other one also is, other 3 are available to take over. So when I joined Air Force, this was how things looked like. Okay, you'll find so many of wires connecting between all these boxes, all 100-way cables, and just one connector going loose, and then the whole thing used to shut down. So now they came out with this concept of a data highway or the data bus in which information was dumped into it. It is a bi-directional thing. So information can flow into the bus, or from the bus it can go into the system. Now each system was coupled, okay, with something like this. Uh, can someone tell me what could be the reason? It's a transformer. Okay. See, all these buses, it's like your water pipeline, okay, where all the taps are connected. There it is, flow is only one direction from the pipe to the tap. But now imagine a piping system where flow can be both ways. Saru, can you guess why they had a coupler unit in this system? Okay, I'll just make it slightly easier for you people to understand. I have just for hypothetical thing, don't take it by face value. So let us say one system is connected like this, likewise n such systems. And it is something which happens in your houses also, something you can visualize.
Sir, if we directly connect those two, it will get few Short circuit.
Yeah, Saru, good. Tell me.
Short circuit.
Come again? I couldn't hear you.
We connect positive and negative both together, it get short circuited.
Oh, good, good, good. So let us say in your house you have a LED bulb, okay? And that LED bulb is faulty. So the moment you switch on that bulb, what happens in your house? In fact, any device, a faulty device, you just plug it into the socket. Then what happens in the house? Sandita? Of course, your mother is going to shout at you. That's a different issue. But she'll shout afterwards only. After something happens, only she'll shout. Something will happen immediately if the wiring is done properly.
So fuse blow.
Yeah, fuse will blow off or the CB will trip off, right? And then what happens? The complete house goes into darkness, isn't it? So you can't have such a situation in an aircraft. Okay, so that's why they came out with this system of couplers. So these are all coupled either using light. Nowadays it's light. Earlier it was using AC. So they have some intermediate blocks which will convert this data signal into a corresponding. It's like our FSK, what we have seen. So even if there is a short, uh, it's like this unit is faulty. Okay. At the most, that AC signal will not go into the bus. That's all. It will not short the total bus. Okay. So that's how they were able to isolate faults. But nowadays, it's all with LEDs. It's called optocouplers. As the name says, it is coupled using optics. So what they do is they store information. Uh, this will be the input side. You have a LED here, and there is something called as a phototransistor on the other side. So this is the output side. This whole thing is a box, okay, one single IC. Whenever there's a high voltage here, this transistor comes on and you get a high here also. If it is low, it becomes low. But the beauty is they are not physically connected now. Input and output, there is total isolation. So in case this side there is a short due to some reason, it's not going to affect the input. So the bus really does not get affected. Are you getting the idea, sir?
Yes, sir.
I isolate the data exchange using light so that any failure is not reflected onto the bus. But still things can go wrong, so you will have multiple buses as standby. Okay. So various standards were evolved, and even now, for like LCS still uses 1553. Okay, or that generation aircraft still uses 1553, or the NATO equivalent is at 3838. The uh, 4.5 generation aircrafts have started using this 1773. So when you go to come across Rafale sort of aircrafts, you'll have 1773 as a standard bus. Similarly, the civil aviation also, they migrated from 429 to 629. And digital communication is what we have seen in this course also. So even if the channel is noisy, you'll be able to recover the data. Unlike analog channels where we have problems. Once noise gets into a channel, getting rid of it is very difficult. Whereas in digital signals, even if there is a bit error, you can always correct it using parity bit and all that stuff. Digital signals have problems like quantization. We in the A to D converters, we saw that there are quantization errors, but still present generation ADCs are accurate enough for all those for the applications what they are meant for. Then we also talked about parallel communication, more wires. They are simple to implement, but more number of wires. So the next logic was to go for serial transfer. The disadvantage being is you require a start bit and a stop bit. Then you had in serial communication itself, you had synchronous and asynchronous communication. And even now, most of the communication in avionics is still asynchronous. Okay. One small concept, there's something called as in 1553 they use Manchester biphase coding. Okay. So it looks slightly complicated, but nothing great. Okay. So let us say we are having a system clock, and this is the data which we want to transmit. This is called NRSZ data, non-return to zero. It's called non-return to zero. It's called NRZ. Okay. What it means is, if the data level is high, is logic 1, it doesn't come to 0 during the bit time. It remains at logic 1, high only. That's what generally all digital systems are. Okay. They don't come down during, if it's a logic 1, during in the bit time, they don't come to 0. But this has its own problems, because if the error is actually it's a logic 1 and it has come to 0, the system will not be able to recognize it. It will pass it as a valid data. So in 1553, what they did was logic 1 was, so this is, if this is your complete bit time, during the bit time, if it is logic 1, this is transmitted as a transition from plus to minus. So it's not 0, okay? So it will be, say, plus 12 volts to minus 12 volts. At no point will it return to 0, okay? But there's a positive confirmation in bit time that it is logic 1. And if it is logic 0, it is a transition from negative level to positive level. So you make doubly sure that whatever you are sending is the right data. So this particular 1553 uses this Manchester biphase coding. Okay, so I think we'll end with this. Maybe another 10-15 minutes. It's more of what that standard is all about. MIL 1553 standard. Okay. Anything you want to ask me regarding this MIL standards? We have not it started about 1553, but this overview of why the standards came out and how it is implemented. And Akshay, for your Viva, I had taken care of those network issues. Okay. So you'll have slightly more marks than what I told you.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay then. So there are no questions. We'll meet in the next class, and people should take care of yourself. Okay, the way things are spreading. Okay then. See you. Thanks, Swaroop. We'll see you in the next class. Bye.
Thank you, sir.